Welcome back to session 3 of our spring data conference. We were just dealing with some technical difficulties here. So again, thank you for those who are online. Come on. Okay, as I think our raising hand function is working. I'm looking at Calista and I believe it does work now. Okay, the agenda, special education updates, incident data, military child flag, exiting students to homeschool, assessment rostering, update on the WIDA EL screener, new fields, Utrecht's validation errors and warnings, and then data privacy. So I assume, Malia, you are online and ready to go?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. I can jump right in if you want me to.
Go ahead. I'm just.
Okay. So, my presentation isn't really necessarily updates. It's more just reviewing. Can you go back? Reviewing items that I've reviewed, that I've gone over during the past year. I just want them fresh on your mind. Just to kind of, we want to improve some specific items with the special ed related data. So first of all is the Scrum exit code A versus X, and the impact of those codes on the Office of Special Education Programs Indicator 1 graduation rate and Indicator 2 dropout rate. Next slide, please. So this has come up fairly often over the years. When do I use the X versus when I use the A exit code? And so I added some notes to the Utrecht specifications a while ago. In the current version, you'll find them on page 103 and 104. And so Scrum exit reason X is for students who are exiting the school and are not expected to return. This includes dropouts, students who transfer, graduates. Don't use the X code at the end of the school year if the student is expected to return to the same school after summer break. We have a code for that. That's the P code. The Scrum exit reason A is for students who exited special education but will continue in enrollment in regular placement. So don't use that code if the student is exiting, if it's the end of the school year and the student is not expected to return to school after the summer break. Use the X code for that. So we want to see If you're using the A code, we want to see that that student is still enrolled in the same school for a little longer after their Scrum record ends. Next slide. Okay, so for the indicator 1 and 2 calculation, why this matters is the A code falls under this category transfer to regular placement, which is excluded from the indicator 1 and 2 calculation. So these are students who were served in special education at the start of the reporting period, but at some point during that 12-month period, returned to regular general or regular education. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a few examples of when the A code was used, but the X code should have been. These are students who graduated, but they ended up being excluded from the indicator 1 graduation rate. And the thing to take note of here is that the school exit date is the same date as the Scrum exit date. So these students should have been exited with the X code. Next slide, please. And here are a few examples of when the A was not used, but should have been. These are all students who were dropouts, and they ended up being included in the indicator 2 dropout rate, but they probably should have been exited with the Scrum exit code A, and then that would have allowed them to be excluded from the dropout rate. The thing to take note of here is that the students remained in school after the Scrum exit date. And we have one example here where the Scrum record ended on September 30th, and the student stayed in school until June 2nd of the next year, and then they ended up dropping out, but really they shouldn't have counted as a special ed dropout. They dropped out from their regular ed programming. Next, I'm going to talk about the graduation status and why accuracy at year end matters. And this is kind of building on top of what Callista spoke about earlier. I see I have a question. Let me pause and get that real quick. So did you let...
There's a question, just a second, go ahead.
Did you let people, oh, is there a question in person too?
Question in person, go ahead. Yeah, so the question is, these A and X records aren't new. This has been around for a while. This is clarification for how to use, and the answer is yes. Okay.
Yes.
And I don't know what's online. Is there a question
online? And then
online?
for the online question, did you let people who had these errors know that they were wrong? We haven't really been in the practice of doing that in the past, but I'm going to try to look at that as we get toward the year end submission this year, go through the Scrum data and try to notify LEAs that have this going on to have you review it and see if you agree that the code should be changed according to what I just presented. So
Okay. Thank you.
So, okay, so graduation statuses, why it matters, some of the reasons to have it accurate at year end. So first of all, in special education rules as well as board rules, it clearly states that a student who earns a regular high school diploma, that's the GC, GM, GR, and GQ codes, is no longer eligible to return to school. So when you enter that code, it suggests that the student actually did earn that diploma, and so it's kind of weird when we see those codes get changed to a retained senior. Granted, sometimes it's a data error. If you're one of the LEAs, like Callista suggested, who just pre-populates every student with the GR code at year end, you're maybe you missed changing one of those to RT. So you know, we're not gonna call you out on anything if you do make those historical updates, but it does cause this permanent exit error to trigger. In this table here, it shows which codes trigger the permanent exit validation error. And you'll notice that there's a few extra for students who don't have an IEP compared with students who do have an IEP. So if they have an IEP, it's just the regular high school diploma that ends their eligibility to return to school. If they got a certificate of completion or a GED or the alternate diploma, that would be the GA code, they are still eligible to return to school. And just the GA code isn't included in this table because it isn't a permanent exit code for students with disabilities, and it's students who don't have an IEP can't even use that code. So it's really not necessary to block those in the permanent exit validation. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then more of why we shouldn't have surprises. We shouldn't have students who are getting that regular diploma code and then having it get changed to an RT. Because this is all supposed to be outlined in a student's transition plan. It should really clearly say what the student's plan is. Are they going to be working toward a regular diploma? Will they work on an alternative degree or the alternate diploma, or will they continue to enroll until they age out? And so hopefully at the end of year, the code that you're entering reflects the transition plans, as well as reality if something changes from the transition plan, like they transfer out of state or something. So it's really important that IEP teams be transparent with students and the parents about the transition plan. And so there should be no surprises or cases of students changing their mind. LEAs shouldn't have to change a GR to a RT because a student or parent changed their mind. Okay, and then finally, fixing grad codes could be problematic. Historical updates are time-consuming work. There's a risk that they won't get done in time. That could result in incorrect data for graduation and dropout rates, October 1 enrollment data, and MSP funding data. And then also if the RA code is incorrectly reported, those are students on retained seniors on path to the alternate diploma. We reassign that student's cohort year. And once we're done calculating a cohort graduation rate and it's finalized, we can't go back and undo the reassignment of the cohort year. So we want to just really make sure that those are reported accurately. And so I did go over these more extensively in previous LEA data meetings, and this is where you can find those more extensive trainings and information. Last October's LEA data meeting, I covered the Scrum exit codes A and X, and I covered the board rules and special education rules related to graduation, transition plans, and enrollment eligibility. And I did a review of the alternate diploma requirements in last year's spring data conference. And here's a link to the session 3 recording from last year if you want to review that training. Okay, and then I want to talk about the Scrum exit code M. Just some reminders about that because it's still fairly new code, and then some expectations that I'm expecting to see in the year-end data after it's cleaned up. So the M code is for a membership exit. So that's when a student must be exited from membership due to unexcused absences, according to the 10-day rule in R277419. So this code, we really shouldn't see it being pre-populated for a student. We can't predict the future of which students are gonna have exceed the threshold of 10 or 30 days of unexcused absences and have to be exited due to this reason. So if I pull up Scrum data today for the whole state, my expectation is that any student who has the M code, their exit date is going to be either today or a date earlier than today, not a future date. And then also, since in order to have to be exited due to a membership exit, that means they had either 10 unexcused absences or 30 consecutive unexcused absences. And so I would expect the unexcused absences data to be at least 10. And then in some cases, greater than 30. And so I've gone over the membership exit a few times pretty extensively, especially last year when it was new. I think I actually covered it in the January, the March, and the spring data conference, so 3 meetings in a row. But probably the March recording or the spring data conference recording from last year are going to be your best resources for reviewing that information from last year, because January we were still kind of figuring some things out. Okay, so the next item I want to talk about is the data related to the indicator 3A, which is special ed student assessment participation. And we just have some tips on that for hopefully improving data accuracy and participation rates. Okay, so first of all, part-time codes. Indicator 3 data comes from EdFacts, which, with few exceptions, expects all students who are enrolled during the assessment window to take a test. We deviate slightly from these instructions. If a student has the part-time code, then we only include them in the denominator for a subject area for the participation rate if they have a course in that subject area. So that means if you have part-time students, you really have to make sure that they have a part-time code reported. That way they won't end up being in the denominator for all participation rates, and they'll only get included in the denominator. Like if they're only taking math, we only want them to show up in the denominator for math. If they also show up in language arts and science, that unfairly hurts your participation rate. So double check that data to hopefully improve your participation rates. Okay, and then next is the participation code. So LEAs must ensure that every student in RISE and Utah Aspire Plus who did not start or complete a test has a participation code to account for why the test was not started or completed. And actually that applies to DLM as well. And then next, the next item is, so we have, so EdFacts expects every student to test. Utah works a little different than that. We have students who just don't even end up in the RISE, Utah Aspire Plus, or DLM system for one reason or another. And then when we're processing the data to submit it to EdFacts, for students who don't have a record in any of those test systems, that means we also don't have a participation code to tell us why the student didn't test. So basically their non-participation reason is unknown. And so we'd prefer to know the non-participation reason for every single student. So ideally, every student would make it into at least one of the 3 test systems for every subject area. Most likely, if they're not making it in and they're enrolled, they're getting membership, they should be making it in. It's because they don't have a correct course code assigned. If they're in grade K8, if they're in grade 9 or 10, maybe the grade level is wrong. Or if they are supposed to be getting into the DLM system, then it would be because the DLM flag isn't marked. So if you'll try to look a little more closely at that this year, that would be really helpful. Okay, so, and more information about this has been presented in recent assessment director and special education director meetings. So if you want to see a copy of that full presentation, or if you have questions about indicator 3 and 3A, contact Tracy Gooley or I. Okay, and this is the last indicator I'm going to talk about. There's 18 of them. I'm not going to talk about all 18. So indicator 4 is about disciplinary removals. And in particular, I want to talk about reviewing discipline data and special and services offered data for that. So the way indicator 4 works is it's a calculation of the removal rate of students with disabilities in an LEA compared with the state rate. So students are only included in this rate if they have a cumulative of greater than 10 days of removals. And if an LEA's rate is greater than 5 times the state rate, then they'll have to do a self-assessment of policies and practices around disciplinary removals. As part of that self-assessment, we have the following question. Does the LEA have a process for submitting or reporting student disciplinary removals to the Utah e-transcript and record exchange and verifying accuracy of submitted data? Next slide, please. So hint, there's a report for that. So under UTREX reports, year-round reports, we have the discipline incident summary for SPED. And this is one of the reports that your special ed director has access to if they have the LEA special education user role. And so if they're using that report, then that is the answer to that question. Okay, so in the self-assessment results this year, we've been noticing that LEAs are responding to that question that, yeah, they have a process for reviewing data in their SIS, but none of them have mentioned verifying accuracy of data in UTREX, and unfortunately it shows. So we've had several LEAs who had to do reviews this year that found that data is or for 2023 came into UTREX inaccurately. And as of a few weeks ago, at least with one of them, we verified that in 2024, it's still coming in inaccurately. And in a few cases last year, we had students who ended up with over 100 extra days of suspension being reported per student, and which was wrong. And so it inflated their indicator 4 rate, it inflated the state's indicator 4 rate. So it was all with the way one particular SIS system was submitting the data to UTREX. So we identified the problem, it's being fixed. And so that problem, hopefully we won't see it again. Hopefully it's fixed now. And 2024 data will be more accurate. But how do we know? We need people looking at their data. And so this is the report to use, Discipline Incident Summary for SPED. This report is designed for LEs to review the discipline data for students with disabilities and verify the accuracy of the type of discipline in school or out of school or expulsion, the length of the removal, and length of removal sometimes change. So, that's yet another reason that it's good to review this report. And whether or not services were provided during the removal, IDEA requires that once a student has been removed for more than a cumulative of 10 days, it's mandatory that services be provided to them during subsequent removals. And then also there's a column in there where you can see what a student's cumulative number of days of removals is. And so it's really easy to see which of the students has exceeded that 10-day mark. So this report updates after each new UTREX submission, and best practice would be to review it every time a student with disability receives a new discipline, as well as review it very carefully and save a copy of the report at year end. So I do training on that discipline incident summary for SPED report every year in the new special ed directors trainings. And it's apparent to me now I need to do that probably in more meetings and more frequently. So, but in the meantime, the training that I've done, I have a copy of that PowerPoint available if anyone wants it. If you could pass that on to all your special ed directors, other staff who are entering discipline data and responsible for reviewing accuracy of discipline data. So please reach out to me for a copy of that.
Hey,
Win.
thank you. By the way, special ed, I mean, I hope you guys all know this, but yeah, the special ed directors have to review this. It's pretty stringent, and it's like, how do you fix the data? We're just appreciate Malia and presenting this stuff. We know you are an important part, but you are not the only part. This is just, anyway, sharing. So Lynn, you're up. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Win Shooter. The things I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to talk about why it's important to have accurate incident and discipline data, examples of potential data quality questions. I want to share a little bit with you about how we're using incident and discipline data at the state. And we'll talk about the importance and value of the use of multiple metrics. I'll share some metrics with you. We can talk about that a little bit. And then finally, new law enforcement fields and updates. All right, so first, why getting these data right is so important. Serious consequences for students, missing class, being excluded from the learning environment due to a discipline, that's a big deal. There are a long list of negative consequences. This can have huge long-term effects for students if they're withheld from the opportunity to be in the classroom due to disciplinary experiences. And there are a lot of policy implications. We can ask and hopefully answer a lot of questions from these data. So it's important that they're as accurate as possible. We can talk about things like the extent to which there are disparities among student groups, and I'm going to share with you some data that you can have a look at that for yourself. You can use these data to identify areas for professional learning, to support, we use it to support collaborative efforts across agencies. And then, of course, it's a state requirement for LEAs to submit these data to the state. And there are a lot of rules around these data, both on the state side and the LEA side. It's pretty current topic at the moment, I'd say. There's a lot of interest in school safety and incident and discipline data. So if you go onto our website, you go to the data and statistics page. If you go to the main page, you can search departments, find data and statistics, go to reports. Under schools, you'll see a report called law, disciplinary and law report, something. Anyone looking at that?
Law enforcement action report.
Bam, there it is. The school disciplinary law enforcement and action report. There it is. So have a look at that. A lot of the images I'm going to show you came right from that report. It's a pretty thorough look at the data that we're collecting from you. So I think it'd be a good thing to be aware of. Maybe I'll also frame this in saying the things I'm going to show you that we're doing with the data and some of the things we're looking at and thinking about. Maybe there's some things that you might consider using at your LEA. I'm curious, would anyone be willing to share, how do you use incident discipline data in your LEAs? Thanks.
Davis School District, we use a lot of that. We pull it into analytic software that we've built, and it helps as an early predictor.
Nice.
Here's what he says.
He said that they analyze it closely and consider its ability to predict future outcomes. So they're looking closely, I assume, at the incident disciplinary experiences that students are having and realizing these students are having these experiences early on. This could be problems for them in the future. So maybe some extra support for those students. Others, how are you using incident discipline data? I know it's pretty extensive. It's a lot to keep up with. There are now 23 different infraction types. You can have a student can have multiple incidents. An incident can have multiple students. There's a lot of complexity in these data. We collect you can have a primary infraction and several secondary, even a tertiary infractions. So, we're filtering those out. The numbers I'm showing you are mostly from primary infractions. There's several roles. You can be the one initiating the incident. You can also be the victim. All those things have to be accounted for when you're using these data. So I hope that you find value in those data at the LA and school level and that you're using that for something informative and productive. All right, so as I say that we fulfill data requests and have conducted other analyses and research. We've also denied a lot of data requests, and it's been a difficult thing to navigate working out. A lot of people are interested in these data. And once we get to the LEA level, the numbers start getting pretty small and it's difficult to share those. So I guess I'm telling you, we've denied a lot of data requests at the LEA level for one reason or another. All right, so these are some data quality questions that you might consider when you look at your data and that we certainly consider. We want to know if it's complete. We're looking for outliers, and we want to see some consistency across time. So to that end, every year, our group conducts a preliminary data review about this time of year. Our team just completed that. And this slide will show you some information about what we learned. It looks like almost LEAs are expected, well, almost all LEAs are expected to, and it looks like 96% of LEAs reported incident data in school year 23. But it looks like this time, how do we do? So we're looking for that minimum threshold of more than one incident per every 50 students. There it is. 88% of LEAs exceeded this minimum threshold for school year 23. So the idea is you would submit these data before the end of the year. We're going to look at it and reach out to LEAs who aren't meeting this minimum threshold. We expect there to be kind of a 1 to 50 ratio of incidents to students. And if not, we'll send you a little email and ask about that. And here's a little bit about what we found from this most recent review. You can see that the LEAs that didn't meet that minimum threshold, there were 37, and there were 12 with 0 incidents. Like I mentioned before, there are some LEAs that maybe won't have any incidents, but certainly by and large, those would be outliers, and that would be unique situations. All right, so to continue with the data quality, here's a look at the completeness. Besides that dip we had in 21, we've been pretty consistent since 2019, hovering right around 96% there of LEAs reporting data. And these are incident counts by year. Again, with the exception of 2021, they've largely increased every year. We can't be confident in saying incidents are definitely increasing every year because we don't know, like I say, the completeness of these data. Are we getting every incident accounted for? Are those making it all the way to the state? And are we reporting those right here? But you can see the difference in the total incident counts and the distinct incident counts that are reported to us from you each year. So considering some outliers, the y-axis are counts of students and the x-axis are incident IDs. So incident ID, the higher numbers on that y-axis are showing us that in some cases, more than 60 students were involved in a single incident, more than 50 students, more than 40 students even. So I don't know what kind of that incident that is. Maybe it's a large group of students who have stayed out of school that day. Maybe they're truant. Maybe it was a large fight. Maybe it was some other group incident where all those things fit into one incident. But I'll show you this so that you could consider, maybe the appropriateness of when things need to be a single incident or when many students need to be included in the same incident. And just to share with you a little bit about the data that we're receiving. Here's another look at outliers. I shared these same slides with you last time from previous year's data. This is all what I'm showing you now from school year 23. You can see across the x-axis the number of days that students were suspended. And then you can see in the y-axis the counts of suspensions by the number of days suspended. So the y-axis is the count of school suspensions. So obviously they're a little lower for the number of days, right? I mean, you have most suspensions happen between 1 and 3 days, maybe 1 and 5 days, maybe 1 and 10 days. But what's happening with students being suspended for like over 100 days? Is that an expulsion? Like, are people one student's been suspended for 180 days. So that seems like incorrect data, likely to me. I don't know how a 180-day suspension, we're saying first day of school, you're suspended for the rest of the year. That feels like an expulsion to me. I don't know. Consider that when you're looking at your suspension data, consider kind of how long those suspensions are for each student and whether or not those are accurate. Here's a big one. If you want to improve the quality of your data right away, have a look at the infraction type other. It was the most common infraction type reported in 2023, and people are putting all kind of stuff in there. They're putting things in there that are about the discipline and not the incident, which doesn't go there because this is meant to be an infraction type. And then there's a text field you can put in. If you mark other, you're meant to enter in the text field. Well, what was the other thing that happened? A lot of the things that are going in this other field are things that could have been assigned to infraction types that already exist. For example, disruption, truancy, fighting, threats, bullying, all those things. You can see counts here where we found those things identified as other that should have been classified as infraction types. So it's a good idea to have a look at that other column. Let's see if we can improve this. This isn't new. This has been happening every year, but let's see if we can tighten this one up in future years. That's definitely an opportunity for improving data quality. All right, I'll skim through this a little bit. It'll be here if you want to use it. These same metrics are communicated in the annual report. I'll share this with you for two reasons. One, so that you have an opportunity to become familiar with the metrics. And then also I'll show you slides from the report just for the sake of sharing data with you so you can see how we're using and reporting the data that we're collecting from you. So the multiple metrics become important because students are having very different experiences. I mentioned how complicated these data are. Many students in one incident, many students. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot going on. So it's important to look at it many different ways, and we'll look at each one of these. This first one I'm using as an example. These data are from 2020. We had an opportunity to look at a group of students who were affected by intergenerational poverty. So their families have been using public assistance at least for a month for more than multiple generations, multiple years. And then low income students, are free and reduced lunch, and then students who are not low income. So I want to call your attention to the first column. That's the percent of enrollment. That one's the group enrollment divided by the total enrollment. So that's, you can see that here. So this group makes up 30% of the total enrollment. This group makes up 4%. But when you look at their percent of incidence, how does this change? Pretty dramatically. So this is one of those opportunities. We're looking at multiple metrics. You say, all right, well, what's their percent of incidence relative to their percent of enrollments? Percent of incidence is going to be the count of incidents divided by that group's count. And then the incident rate, or the count of students who have more than one incident. So we're counting incidents, we're counting students, we're dividing that by the group. And you can see right away in this table some pretty serious disparities. If you look at the percent of incidents, you see for IGP 31%. The incident rate for that group is 9.5%, and it goes down from there. Low income 6.4 and not low income 2.8. So students who have access to fewer resources seem to be having notably higher incident rates than students who do have access to more resources. This is from 2023. Again, this is in the report. I just want to highlight some of these disparities. So you saw the metric for the incident rate. You can see here that some student groups are experiencing much higher incident rates than others. The one I showed you just then was race ethnicity. This one are other student groups. You can see low income, English learners, students experiencing homelessness, and special ed students really leading the way there. All right, so 3 more of these slides to look at these metrics a little bit more closely. This is the count of days divided by the group enrollment, and the count of days are the lost days of instruction. So if a student was suspended for a day, that's what we're talking about here. And these are the number of lost days per 100 students. It's my understanding that this metric is pretty common with population estimates and things you look up where you want to create a balance, right? There are fewer students who are identified as American Indian students than there are white students. So when you look at the percentages, sometimes it's hard to kind of balance that out and level the playing field. Well, what you're looking at here is the number of lost days per 100 students, and you can see some pretty dramatic results and differences in these groups. Take American Indian, for example, 34.9. That means that per 100 students, that group is losing 35 days. That's a pretty dramatic number. So this incident-based discipline rate is the sum of incidents. The sum of disciplines simply divided by the sum of incidents. And what we're trying to understand here is an indication of the discipline counts relative to the incidents. So students get incidents, some students get more disciplines than others. That's what this is telling us. So I don't know that those values mean something on their own. Like we don't have a baseline or a certain target number that we're looking for. In this case, you're using this metric to consider these values relative to one another. And then finally, this average number of days lost by each student group is simply that. It's the number of lost days of instruction divided by the number of disciplines. So this will be an indication of the days lost per discipline. So again, we see American Indian students per discipline they receive are losing more days than a lot of other student groups. And you can see that especially, you know, students in foster care, English learners also not a good balance here in terms of why is this? You know, why do we find that given the disciplines there, maybe it's a matter of the type of incident. You know, that's one thing we're not considering here. So maybe for some of these situations, the incidents were much more, had a bigger impact, or were considered they needed a more discipline. And so maybe that's why they're losing, you know, some of these groups are losing more, but there's no obvious explanation. These groups don't have that built into them on their own merit. So I think this is worth considering in your data and your LEAs. All right, enough of that. New law enforcement fields. This last year was the first year we collected these data. These are the incident counts and student counts for each of those things: search and seizure, criminal citation, non-criminal citation, and 23 physical arrests on campuses. All right, there were a few updates to the Utrecht specs. Harassment, we've added the word conduct. Robbery or theft has been added. And then these, we've just made, you just saw the counts of these. Here, we've added into the Utrecht specs that this is on school grounds while school is in session or during a school-sponsored activity. So there was a little bit of ambiguity in those, and hopefully that clears that up. I mentioned that there are 2 new infraction types. Those are cyberbullying and hazing. So bullying has now, these were included as part of bullying. Now they're separated out. And then in terms of ongoing activities and developments, hope to have some definitions for you for these infraction types. Like I mentioned, I think we're up to 23 or so of those now. So definitely would be helpful if we had clear definitions of those. I think you can look for that in the future. I think people are going to continue to be interested in school safety. Aaron shared with you before that there's talk of a public dashboard. We've been careful in how we treat these data, and we've managed them very tightly. It sounds like at some point, at some level, these data are going to be shared more broadly. So yeah, that's what I brought to share with you. Lista. Thank you.
Okay, I have 2 review items in the sense that these aren't new fields. I don't know that we've ever talked about the military child flag in a recent meeting, but it's not a new field, but we felt that looking at the data, we wanted to go over it. So USBE found that some LEAs are not reporting the military child flag accurately. This field is submitted on the student record, and again, it's not a new field, but because we saw that the data weren't necessarily reflecting that everyone was reporting it, that should be, we wanted to go over what this field is. So it is an optional field in Utrecht, again on the student record. This definition and code table is coming directly from the Utrecht specifications, and I gave the reference in the current specs if you want to refer to that. But it should be marked for all children of military parents as defined by the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children. There are notes on this that kind of go in further detail about what that means. But the codes themselves, it basically needs to be marked yes if the child meets those requirements. If it's left blank, then it's not a military child. And so what we were seeing is some LEAs were just leaving them blank when we knew that they should have had some yeses. Here are the notes that are directly from the specs. I'm not going to read through all of these, but a lot of questions as to what defines a military child can be answered through these notes. So if you have specific questions about how to flag if a child is classified as a military child or not, I would first go here, because it's pretty good about defining that. Why it's important and why we're bringing this up now, that we're aware that not everyone is reporting it. It's important for a few reasons. One of them is for EdFax reporting. There's multiple EdFax groups that use the military status as a reporting group. And then also this status is used as a reporting group for ESSA accountability. Other than that, it's always important to report accurate data in any field. So we encourage you and are asking you, as we head into year end, please review this field specifically now that we're bringing up that perhaps the data is not always being reported accurately, that you look and make sure that you are flagging this where it should be a yes and not just leaving it blank as the default. Yes. A good question. So the question was, how are we supposed to know that the parents are in the military, or when would that have been collected? I don't know the answer to that question. Yes.
We collect it for, collect federal cards for funding, for federal funding.
Okay. So it sounds like some LEAs collected and maybe some don't. So it sounds like you may need to look at a way that that can be collected in order to report this if it's not being collected already. Yes, Cliff? So Cliff in the room said that he thought that it's part of the registration process and verifying if that's true or not.
That's true in this case.
So it sounds like it's true for some LEAs, maybe not for others. So if your LEA is not currently collecting that, it might be a good idea to add that to your registration process, because this is a field that we need to have reported accurately for the students. If you want to know what your LEA is currently reporting, you can look in your examine data file on the UTREX overview. I gave you the column header, it's BP, but you can just scroll over on the student record. It should be one of the first few tabs. That column will basically tell you every student that is currently being reported with this flag. If you have all blanks, then that means no students are being reported. We will also, meaning data and statistics, look at this data in the courtesy data review, which is something we haven't ever done. Just to give your LEA an idea of what you're reporting or not reporting to UTREX. And hopefully that will help as well, so that by July you can get those entered correctly if this applies to students in your LEA. Any questions on the military child flag? Okay. My second item is also a review item, and this actually came from Paula Huber, who supports Aspire at USBE. She said she gets a lot of questions about how to exit students to homeschool. So I'm just reviewing that. Excuse me. We do have 2 exit codes in UTREX that should be used when a student, again, exits to homeschool. And this is on their student record. So charters should use the exit code CH, which is meaning that the student is transferring from a charter to homeschool. And then districts should be using the TH code, which is a transfer from a district to homeschool. So anytime a student has an enrollment record and then exits to go to homeschool, those are the two codes that should be used. You can find more information on this. Again, there's extensive notes in the UTREC specs on page 34. We do look at this data when we're looking at grad rates, and David and we look at it closely because the CH and the TH exit codes are excluded from the cohort grad rate calculation. And so because of that, we do want to make sure that LEAs are using these codes properly. So this next slide talks about documentation, because to use the exit to homeschool codes, proper documentation is required. Districts should keep a homeschool affidavit on file when a student exits to homeschool. Charters should keep a copy of the district homeschool affidavit when possible. We realize that in talking to LEAs, that's not always possible, or they try and they can't get it. And so for charters, there is some other ways that they can document that, which I'll go over. So again, looking in the UTREC specs, this, I won't read all of this, but it goes over pretty extensively the documentation that is acceptable. And there's a link to it's called the Agreed Upon Procedures Guide. So if you ever have a question on, does this documentation count or not, this is a good place that you can look. For the notes, and this is referring to when a student leaves a charter school, it's a little more straightforward when they leave a district, so they have that affidavit. But for a charter that can't get the affidavit, so normally what happens is the student leaves and the charter may not know at first that they're going to homeschool, so you can exit them out with just a regular transfer code. Then what happens is the other LEA, or they notify the other LEA in which the student resides, and parental contact information. Excuse me, I'm trying to read this note and it's kind of small. Basically, they get the information that they need from the other LEA or from parents. And again, when they can get the signed affidavit, that's the first and best choice. But when they can't, they can use the exit to homeschool code and then provide documentation in other acceptable ways. This is used in the event that you get audited either by USBE or an independent auditor. And so point B talks about that, where an affidavit is not on file. You can still use that CH code, but you must verify that the student has registered as a homeschool student with their district of residence. So that has to be verified. And then the wording is that you should be able to produce written evidence of a good faith effort to properly account for this student. So whether that means you emailed the parents, you called the parents, it needs to be documented with as much detail. So the date, and so don't just use the code and keep it in your head or on a sticky note. It does actually need to be documented. Any questions on that? Okay, that's all I have. So if there's no questions, I'll turn the time over to Maureen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Maureen Rushing. I'm with the assessment department. I'm just here to give you a quick overview of assessment rostering and how it apply, how your UTREX data applies to it. So we have basically 3 types of assessments that we roster. There are grade-based assessments, and that's going to be Utah Aspire Plus and ACT. If you are a regular ed student and you are enrolled in the appropriate grade, you're going to roster for Utah Aspire Plus and ACT. If you're dually enrolled in 3, we have kids that are enrolled in 4 different schools. We apply tiebreakers to see which school gets the student rostered. We look at school of record, membership days, their entry date. If it's a brick and mortar school, there's a whole list we go down. Our next set of assessments are sort of designation or program based. If you are designated as a 1% student, then you're going to roster for DLM testing, dynamic learning maps, our alternative assessment. If you are in an EL program, ML program, then you are going to most likely roster for WIDA testing if you are not marked fluent in English. Finally, we have course-based assessments. So once again, you have to be enrolled in the appropriate grade, not marked as a 1% student. And then additionally, you need to be enrolled in a course with the correct core code that will trigger assessment rostering. Also for dually enrolled students, for these courses, we have some more tiebreakers. Sorry, those courses are RISE, Acadience Math and Reading, and Apple. Starting next school year, I should mention that Acadience Reading will only be administered through ALO. We are not going to be dealing with Amplify anymore, and we will be rostering students into ALO. There won't be any more manually rostering of students in ALO. Through ADM, we will still be offering Acadience Math. You have the option to choose ALO or ADM for math. Now, how do we roster these students? We do have nightly data exchanges for Apple, Acadience Math and Reading, if you're using ADM or Amplify. DLM Rise, Utah Aspire Plus, these are all nightly data exchanges. Also Utah Compose and UTIPS, pretty much all students go into those. So there's not really any, you don't qualify, you just go straight into those. We do a pre-ID file for ACT, and we do 2 pre-ID files for WIDA access. Yes, question? Yes. Yes. No. So if you're familiar with how we are creating teacher accounts in Utah Aspire Plus this year, it's going to be the same way. We're going to pull teacher email addresses from Cactus and create teacher accounts in ALO using that same process. Oh, yes, sorry. The question was, will you still be creating teacher accounts in ALO as you did in Amplify? And maybe Cliff can add some clarification to this. It's been a little bit of a process getting those teacher emails, creating teacher accounts in Utah Aspire Plus, because it does pull those email addresses from Cactus, and some teachers don't update their email address in Cactus very often. We do message out to everyone, process for updating email address. So we're hoping it's going to smooth out a little bit by the time fall rolls around. Utah Aspire Plus for 9th and 10th graders. Yes, Cliff.
Yes. feel that they're better. Data privacy.
Yes, because
You
it,
gotta say all that again. Good online people.
so Cliff said, oh, I don't know. We're open to other options besides pulling those email addresses from Cactus. But, and we, oh, sorry, we do have an agreement that the vendors have to agree to that they will only use those email addresses for creating account purposes, no other purposes. It is a little bit shocking sometimes when teachers sign in and they see a personal email address, because that's the one we have in Cactus. Some of those email addresses are AOL email addresses. Some of them are Hotmail. There are some very old email addresses we've come across in this process. Yes,
We have a
question.
question online. They're asking, how will you create teacher accounts when you get rid of Cactus?
We pull them from the.
You gotta repeat the question, Celine.
Oh, how do we get teacher email addresses when we are done with Cactus? Yes, we will have to have another way to do it once Cactus is replaced. All right, so yes, pre-ID files for ACT and WEDA access. We send two. We just, on the day we create the file, we make one big list. We upload it to these vendors. So if a student has fatal error that day, they don't get in the list. But ACT and WEDA does allow some manual rostering of students. So we catch the other students that way. Question?
So on the timing. Good, Brandon?
Yes, it is.
Repeat the question.
The question was, is there a time frame for when vendors pull student information from us? It's generally between 10 p.m. 2 a.m. It's in the night. We did run into a situation last week where we realized that Utah Aspire Plus was pulling data very early, 8 p.m. our time, and we ran into a problem. But since then, they now pull their data around 2 a.m. They've adjusted their time to pull data so that we don't run into some trouble that way. Oh, Cliff knows the earliest that anyone pulls data was the question. Yes, Cliff. Oh.
We recommend to them to try to do it at a late period of night into the early morning. So she indicated between 10 and 8 a.m. time that they typically will be pulling out their data. But we also appreciate it. So I feel that there's really discussion for deciding whether it's in its interests to limit their data collections that they're sending to us only during opposite time frames. So where that data is available each day, and then that limits the duration of time it takes to obtain that data shipment to.
Okay, gotta repeat.
It's all. We don't know whether. Getting. And that's keeping all the paper. Or the phone.
Yep. Okay. So the question was about the window when we vendors pull student data. And we do advise them to keep it in the middle of the night so that to give everyone a chance to have their data go through. We would suggest LEAs, maybe think about submitting their data a little earlier in the opposite window so that there's not a problem with data still running while they pull. We can't make any promises though, because things happen. And that is why we give a 24 to 48 hour window for students showing up on assessment rostering once they've been updated in UTREX. Yes. I can definitely make, oh, sorry. The question was, can we make a list of when vendors pull data? And yes, I am happy to do that. I will survey them and I'll get a list out to everybody. Yes, a question.
Questions that they're asking why you use this.
It's the only place where teacher email addresses are, pretty much. It's the only place. Oh, sorry. The question was, why do we use Cactus to get teacher email addresses? No one ever asks me questions. It's the only place where teacher email addresses are, across the board collected. So that is where we get them from. All right. So your data and assessment rostering. Number one, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, students with fatal errors on their records do not roster for assessments. If a student has an error that's fatal, they are not going to be on a roster. And like Cliff said, the loss you get from that is time. It takes 24 to 48 hours for a student to show up on a roster after a fatal error is corrected. So a student might be all ready to test. Teacher has them prepared. They are feeling good. They sit down to take a test and they cannot sign in. So you're losing out on that preparedness and they are having to wait 24 to 48 hours to test again. That also applies to record changes. If you have a change of term during a testing window, if a student changes courses, they're going to drop off a roster and you're going to have to wait that 24 to 48 hours to get them back. Finally, inaccurate rostering can affect accountability. I hate to use the word inaccurate. It sounds very negative, but especially with RISE, we roster students for RISE tests by their course core codes. If a course has an incorrect core code applied to it, it can cause a test to be created for them. And then we're going to have to put in a participation code or a non-participation code for that test. It can affect your participation rates. If you have a lot of students in wrong courses and you have a very small sample of students, that could affect your accountability. So really, we would advise you to really look at those core codes that you assign to courses just to make sure. So where can you find those? Oh, sorry, one more thing. Private and homeschool students that are not enrolled in any public school are still allowed the opportunity to take our RISE, UA+, Acadience, the big end of year tests. There is a process for rostering those students in your SIS. There's a link to the instructions on how to do that on this slide. And I'm happy to help if you need any assistance with this. And finally, if you need to know what core codes go with what courses, you can check here. The student rostering manual, which outlines every assessment we roster, and the business rules that go along with it are in this assessment rostering manual. It's a great resource. Please read it if it applies to you. And if you have any questions about rostering, you can get in touch with me. And if that's everything, I'm going to hand it over to Cliff.
All right, so before I get started, I just want to kind of hit on some of the common theme that I think that we should all be getting from this today, and that's that what we focus on with all this is data. And we have to ask ourselves, what's the purpose of data? Why do we collect the data? What's in it? Who's it for? And that's the thing that we really try to focus on as a state. And I know that we do all the way through every level here in Utah with our education system is how can we use information to benefit the students and to benefit those who are supporting the students. And then you say, what is it necessarily that makes it valuable? And what is it that the state can offer me that makes this valuable? So that really comes down to a lot of the same things of that it needs to be available And that's where, you know, we try to do our best in collecting that data, taking part in sharing that data, making it available to people that can help with funding, make it available for the students' benefit, for the teachers' benefit, whoever it empowers to know that information. That's really what our collections are about. It's why we need that information, because also in that same availability, it gives that accuracy of this can help with funding, this can help with their knowledge. And that's the other key takeaway, is that it's accuracy. It's been repeated many times that the value of what we have is very tied to if it's good data. So the items that I'm going to be talking about, again, are heavily dependent on availability and the accuracy of it. So to start, we've got the update on the ELL WIDA screener fields. So this is something that was identified by LEAs would be helpful for LEAs to share with each other. That's where we're stepping in for availability, because the LEAs need this information to save the students from having to do more than one screener, as they could be transferred from one school to another school. It impacts the student very directly. It impacts the staff having to give it more than once. So we're trying to provide a means for that to be available to empower all of you and to empower the students' time to be more effective. You'll see that here in this purpose. This is really a play up from last month as well. So I'm trying to take a little bit more of a fresh take on it instead of reading through it. If anybody wants to, you know, go through and reiterate back through, feel free. I think that it's defined its purpose pretty well. The fields that we need for this to be able to make this happen is for the WIDA screener proficiency score to be collected. It's to our understanding that that information has already been collected by schools, and it helps you to know whether or not they take the access score. This is the same thing. The only difference is that now we're saying as a state, we want to try to help with that availability, to share that information out to where another LEA can have that same information instead of it just being locked to that school and then having to wait for potentially that to be mailed out to the other school. With that score, it's helpful for us to know the date. So we're also going to be asking for the date to be added as well too. And as a note, none of this is going to actually impact whether or not the student's record loads. None of this is going to impact whether or not you can finalize your collections at the end of the year. This is again about us taking data, making it available to benefit everybody involved to where that's just more useful. Where is this information going to be? If I can get to the next slide here. Here we go. The student search or student find, not everybody is empowered with this, but we currently believe that we're empowering the right people with this out on the data gateway. If there's people that you feel that should have access to this, this is completely PII information. This gives a lot of information. Some of this can be made available just to your own district, or it can be made available to go out past your district, depending on what that role is. So any feedback that we get on that, we can try to help make sure that we're empowering the right people. But this is where it's going to be. As you would come to the data gateway, you would put in your information, their SSID, the student's name, information, find out where they're at. And then the results, you're going to see have an assessment tab. And where we currently have the WIDA access scores, it'll be right beneath that. That's where you would see their screener information. And it's not going to be many different detailed levels. Like I said, we're collecting 2 things from you, and that's what we're going to be sharing back, is those 2 things, but with extra piece of information that we just know the source of where it came from. So we're not going to actually ask you to tell us what LEA you are, because we already know that. But that's going to also be on the page. So you'll know the screener proficiency score, you'll know the date that it was taken, and then you'll know where it was taken. And putting that together, it should help everybody out. Again, the usefulness of this is really going to be dependent on if people embrace it, if they use it, and if we train people to go out and use it. It's not going to use itself. We're going to actually have to direct people. When you get a student that may need to be screened, you need to go out and check. You need to check the data gateway, see if that student has already taken a screener score already. Or if you've already got their CUME file, great, it's already going to have it there. But a lot of times, people want to do that on day one when that information isn't available yet. Yeah. We have a few roles. I can try to share a little bit of that out. I can put that in a follow-up that Calista is going to have on this. But yeah, trying to take it out of like technical terms, because what I've got in my mind is more of like data gateway roles. But I think that, reaching back out to the WIDA team will be able to best explain that out of getting that to you. And again, if you find somebody that needs it and they don't have it, please let us know. Thank you. All right, the next thing I've got is UTREX validation errors and warnings. This really has a single focus for today, and that's the address data. So this has been a little bit of a hot topic and is going to take work and communication to be able to make this also effective, to make it available and accurate. Currently, this data is being checked with the standard clearinghouse data checks that say, this address line 1, it has a max length of 100, address line 2, max length of 100. So just those default data type checks of, will this fit in the block? So very, very open there. The city, max of 24, state 2, zip 5, an exact 5. All those things are just extremely basic, but not really covering everything of what we do today. The next thing that we're already doing today is an API call out to the Utah Geospatial Resource Center, or GRC, and that's to validate the address. So we feed that information over to them and they tell us back, not this is where Bob or Sally live, and this is a good match for Bob or Sally. It's strictly, is this a valid address in Utah? So we're not basing it off of a secondary set of information that says, oh, well, you've got their old address. We're not going to be able to help with that. We're simply trying to make sure that this is something that can be used by other programs such as CMP that mentioned earlier that they desperately need to be able to send communication to put people into programs, to be able to make sure that parents can sign off to work with the students. And that's what this is primarily set up to support, other than just making sure that our funding is going to Utah students as a general whole. That's always a good thing for us to be able to validate. And this also is currently just going to be a warning for the rest of the year. But as it says at the top, there's only a warning for a couple of months. So this is going to become work. This is going to become an obligation that we're all set to actually have to address. So starting August with the new school year, all the student physical addresses are going to be verified. The means of that verification, like I said, it starts out with going out to the Utah GRC, and that's going to be handling standard street addresses. Standard street addresses, they're perfect for. They can tell us, yes, no, this is valid, this is in the state, and we're good. If it's a brand new address that just barely got created, somebody came up with a number and it's not in their system yet, then that may come up with a false error that could come back, and you may have to find an alternate method for it, because we need to have something. That's also one of the other reasons why we have alternate methods, is when there isn't a valid street address, or just when our validation system doesn't have that information yet, and it's not valid yet. That we've got alternate methods that we'll accept and we can fully validate, and they still serve that exact purpose, that they can get that communication to the people that need it and empower the students. I see a few hands or questions that came up, so I'll take a pause there. But
I just wondered about homeless that maybe live in a trailer park somewhere, a car,
Mhm.
vehicle.
for sure.
Repeat the question, Ronley.
Yes. So the question was, what about homeless students? What's the best direction to take for that? And I'm going to lean on what we've done in the past and recommended in the past still until we come up with a better answer. And that's that for homeless students, we'd recommend that the point of contact is going to be still at the district itself. And you would give that district or school's address for that homeless student, as there may not even be a physical place that they go to be able to pinpoint and say they go to this corner somewhere. They could be anywhere, any day. So there isn't truly a physical location other than the fact that they're going to that school. And that means that that's the best physical point of contact. Next question, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So. What's the source?
Yeah, so. Yes, the question is, hopefully I get this repeated right. How are we validating it? And that different LEAs have different means of trying to validate it themselves based off Google or other sources. That's why I'm trying to be as clear as I can on this without getting extremely technical, but I'm happy to go extremely technical. I can give you, or anybody interested in that technical, our exact API calls to the Utah GRC, and you can call them yourselves. You can build it into your system, empower yourselves with the same tools that we have. I will say, however, that because the Utah GRC didn't do all the alternative things that we're going to also add on as the next things outside of the street address, there are some homebrew. These home brews aren't available yet today, but they will be before the start of the year. And those home brews are GPS code, and that's using either the decimal degrees or the DMS, the degrees, minutes, seconds. And I've got examples on here, what that is, what that looks like, and what we're recommending for that sort of standard format. There can be a lot of personalization of how people use those. Sometimes people will want to try to write out the full word north, the full word west, and we'll have to potentially work some of those kinks out together as far as with creating that standard structure. But since that is going to be a homebrew solution, we'll be able to work with you on that and be able to try to address that. Did that answer your question enough? Okay.
Question in the chat, they're asking,
Good.
what are the alternate methods?
Yes, thank you. The next ones, and we'll come back to remaining questions, of course. The GPS code. So standard street address for address line 1. And just to clarify, the focus is address line 1. The rest of the address should be accessible and should be usable, which is going to be your city, state, and zip. Again, if it's a case of homeless or something, just use the school or district. But in a case of that they do have a physical location, just not a valid street address, that's what we're trying to provide that alternative means for, and that's a pinpoint. GPS code and Google Plus codes are extremely similar. It may not be known and you think that they're separate things, but really the GPS code is just the fine detail, and the Google Plus code is a more conversational block size. Every GPS code could be dropped into a Google Plus code. Every Google Plus code has a range of a GPS quadrant. So the two are exchangeable. It's just one is a range that makes it easier to communicate and less things to write out. To where you're not saying, 41.6 digits and then another of like negative 111 and another set of digits. That's going to be really hard for people to remember. The point and purpose of Google Plus codes isn't limited to what we're using it for. And the entire thing is under the premise of shorthand GPS. It was derived to be able to make GPS something that people could communicate without it just being right over their head. And this is way too many numbers, way too much to understand. You're not going to get a kid that's going to be able to remember, a big, huge string of digits like that. But you might be able to teach them Q45-8 plus 6C. They can remember that. That's a much smaller bit of information that along with the city, state, that you can actually turn that into a pinpoint anywhere. And that goes down deeper and deeper. Those plus codes, its little block sizes can get down to extremely small, like 10-foot type areas, to where you could pinpoint it, or you could leave it more open. Right now, we're not trying to restrict and say that you have to get down to a definite size, like you have to go down and add enough characters that it's within a 30-foot area. Our goal is accuracy. Our goal is that accuracy, it's not intended for us to be able to pinpoint and tell people, we have their location. It's to where that information is available for mailing purposes, to where something could be delivered to them. If you give us a code that gives like a 10 square mile area, they're not going to get that delivered. And if they do, it's going to be because they're leaning on something outside of the plus code. So you'll be working the system a little bit, but we're still okay with that because it's about the result of getting it mailed and getting it to them. And we know the general area. So we'll accept that, and we'll still encourage that the detailed directions that people give for very rural places, like it's a mile south of this road on the left, that can still be entered in an address line too. And whoever it is that's delivering that piece of mail can have both that combination to empower them to do the best they can to be able to deliver that. So that's the other piece to throw out on this, is that that's what we've had in the past, and we've got many of for rural Utah, is that it says, those local directions that somebody might understand that's local. But between the combination of the two, we think that we're going to have the best of both worlds and also satisfy the needs of the state and also under a legislative requirement to be able to have verifiable physical locations, and then still allow you to give that conversational piece. Plus, do you have a question?
So we've had a district who's preparing for October because they have hundreds of points right now. And when we tested the Google Plus codes and Utrex, the warnings didn't go away. And so I guess the question is, so I think you said your team was going to try and find a solution over the summer to make sure that this method actually clears validation.
Correct.
Repeat the question.
Yes. So the question, or also a bit of a statement, was that we presented this in the past, and we tried to do a sort of test run and used an LEA to say, go give us a plus code and let's see if it's supported by the Utah GRC, which it is not. So that led us to say, well, we need to put our money where our mouth is and actually fulfill that need, that we know that this is the best way to help locate the students and to get people to those locations. So my development team has already gone out, researched and planned and plotted out what we're going to do to be able to put this into effect.
hopefully within the next month, certainly before the end of the school year. And that's what's going to take it to where those aren't warnings because we can actually validate them and that those will work. At the same time, we decided not to lean on the Utah GRC to take the GPS codes, but that we're going to homebrew that too. I think some of you may find that you can actually feed and validate some of your own GPS codes into that. And again, if any technical people want to get those coordinates of what the corner points of the state are, we're happy to share that, either GPS codes or Google Plus codes, the range of it. We're happy to share any technical information that you'd like. Oh, that sounds great. Talks with Utah GRC, encourage them to do something to support it, save us some effort if so. And the comment was that there was a LEA that attempted it with plus codes and they didn't get a warning. So that's leading me to think that hopefully the API call to the GRC is handling that correctly and it wasn't something that slipped through the cracks. Either way, when we apply those two additional methods, we are creating a path towards which one of the three it's going to take. If it looks like a GPS code, if it looks like a plus code, we're going to send it down that path first and try to validate it there instead of waste a call out to the Utah GRC. But again, yeah, we will be trying all the methods of validating that address that's sent to us. Other questions I haven't answered yet? Yeah, we got, I think, 4 right now. Whoever wants to go.
And then disappearing 2 days later and then showing up 2 days later. They seem to be the same address validations. So I don't know if there's something changing with the API or if there's something wrong with the data that I'm actually. Yeah, wondering if there's a reason those are not being consistent.
That is a wonderful question and bit of feedback that I haven't got yet. So if you want to get me some of those details and example, I can try to trace and walk that through and see what's causing that to be inconsistent. So just to restate that for everyone, the comments were that some days people are seeing them, some days they're not. It's a little bit inconsistent for the warnings right now. And that was my follow-up to get those details and to be able to try to trace that through for consistency purposes. Our aim would be to, again, be accurate and to get those accurately showing up as a warning every day until something's changed. Okay, good.
So, yeah, just a question on, and I have a question from 2 different perspectives. So
Okay.
confidential addresses. So I don't know if we still do this, but definitely at one point did something where the address just said confidential, like the street and number. Like I said, I don't know if we do that anymore, but there's also and this I can't remember the details of how it was, but last legislative session last year, they passed that to build the victim address confidentiality program. Specifications on what requirements for LEAs and what to do with, you know, people who enrolled in that program. I don't remember the details on that and what kind of address we're supposed to. This is going to conflict with any of that.
Okay, so the question is could this conflict with confidential addresses, things involved in like the Utah Victim Protection Act that went out over the last year? And thankfully, I've had some involvement in communication with that, and went over some of the technical details for that. And I don't believe that there is a conflict involved in that. The methodology, unless it's changed, since when I last reviewed with them, was that the last known address is what stays in the system. The confidentiality means that it simply becomes stale information and they don't know where they've moved to. They don't know any forwarding new address, and on your system and every state system, it's not allowed to have the new address, only through that protection agency. That's the only state system that's allowed to actually hold the new true address. So they also set up a forwarding system that forwards not from that address to their new address, because that would defeat the purpose. It forwards it then to the victim protection agency, and then they forward it one more time out to the address that they know about that others don't. So I hope that answered it. And if any of that's not accurate for what you find, please reach out to me and share that information. Listen. Yeah. Yeah. So the comment was, again, just another statement of inconsistency with the warnings not being every single day. And that's something that we'll look into to try to identify what needs to happen to make that consistent and reliable, because we don't want people thinking, oh, it's resolved. If there's still something to do, we want it to stay on that list for resolution up until it is. And again, especially when it turns into fatals, it'll just add the pressure on that to be even more so. And just to note, the terminology of fatal, some people aren't super happy about or like. So you'll find that I'll try to be using references more of like non-loading than parentheses fatal. Fatal is a terminology we've used for many years and people are quite familiar with it, but it's more straight about what its intent is and what's going to happen if it's not resolved, when we just call it for what it is, and it's something that causes it to not load. So you'll see that. As I got noted here, when this becomes a non-loading error, it's going to prevent student assessments, funding, etc., all the things which getting loaded into UTREX enable for a student. So the state being able to represent that student, it just won't happen. Or it won't be able to be updated. So if they were in the past somewhat loaded, then they'll then become stale, and any new information won't be able to get updated on them. And we'll just have that past stale information until we get a valid record that allows for a physical address to be validated and pass one of our validations. Any other questions? Good, Riley.
We've got, we have Wyoming students that attend our LEA. Will this be a problem?
Yes.
Yeah, repeat the question.
So the question was. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so the question was that there's Wyoming students at some schools or districts that are currently in the system, and will that be a problem? And my initial answer was yes, but there could be some caveats in that where we have some exclusions that need to be talked about. So I would recommend that if you are aware of your students making any exclusions like that and having out-of-state students, bring it to the table, let's talk about it, and let's figure out what needs to be done for it. The general direction that I have for this is our primary purpose is validating that all students have a Utah address. For instance, if their address is with the parent that lives in New York, but they actually reside here in Utah, I think that that may mean that we need to get that resident address rather than the, for instance, New York address of that parent. You know, those will be some conversations which I think are completely viable, and will need to be discussed and worked out. But
What if there's only a PO box?
not good enough. Yeah, PO box, the question was, will a PO box suffice? And PO box, through legislation, was determined is not a sufficient physical address. So PO boxes will need to be given to a physical address. And unless something passes that changes that, that's the current state of things. As that would count for mailing address, but what we're saying is required is a physical address. Go ahead.
So should these be generating warnings right now? They're-
Yes. The question was, should these be currently generating a warning? And the answer is yes. We have put that part out.
There's kind of. Yes. Yes.
All right, so a little bit of extra feedback of some further inconsistencies of addresses that are believed to need to trigger as not a valid street address, but aren't triggering today with a warning. So again, that's going to be some takeaway that I have to help look into that, ensure that the validation that we have for the API is happening consistently and reporting back consistently for a warning that will then later become a failure.
Let's see.
Okay.
If it's listed that.
Okay. So there we go. The feedback was if they have a resident status of A, then we're not going to be sending them to this address validation for any of the three. So that gives them an exclusion if they have a resident status of A. Any other questions? Okay. So some of what I've got here, again, is a little bit of reference. So again, showing what we believe are the two common types of referencing a GPS code, which again, if we get feedback of it needs to be a different way, we can try to work with that as we get the inconsistencies figured out as well too. It'll also better help us to identify when we have somebody giving those GPS codes in a slightly different way, like saying out degree instead of actually giving the symbol for degree, or north instead of an N, things like that. I've given the link for the Google Plus codes and reference to the full code, just to clarify that full coordinate, which is the first one that has the extra 4 characters on it. What that is that gives the exact position on the planet on a very large level. When you give a city and state, you don't actually need that, but with that full coordinate, you know, it's 100% identifiable anywhere on the planet. Without it, and you do the very short one, the Q458 plus 6C, you need to actually know what city and state you're referring to, as that is a reoccurring thing. That level of the code can reoccur in multiple parts of the planet. So if there's any questions with that, please reach out. I'm happy to set up meetings to go over any of this with people, or to also send out any resources or documentation. I'd already mentioned the address line 2 continue with descriptive things which are helpful for people to be able to get to the address, get to the location by description. The city and state and zip are still required, regardless of what means of validation we're implementing. And there's been no change into the clearinghouse rules, the 100-character limits, the 24-character limits, all that, the zip code being exactly 5, that's all unchanged. So if anybody hasn't seen plus codes, this is a quick screenshot of USBE looking up a plus code. And you can see that we've got these nice little grid boxes. These boxes can go smaller, and you could define it even lower level than this. But this is sufficiently small level, and that I believe is probably the level that people would hope for delivering mail, is somewhere about that given level. As you can see, there's the full address that it shows, the full GPS address below it. I'm sorry, the full Google code, and then the full GPS below it. So both of those are referenced whenever you go there and you look one up. There's also plenty of reverse lookups. And there's also a lot of open source information about this. The Google Plus codes will never change over time. So there's no risk of, well, what if they stop supporting it? What if anything goes away? It's permanent allocation of space and sizing. So they're forever and they'll always be usable. And it's again, open source. So anybody who wants to add their own validation system, there's libraries out there to help assist with that. My team will also be utilizing, like I said, because we're creating our own version of this to be able to validate it. Also, as a note too, I said the purpose for why we're collecting the data goes beyond what we're asking for. And I think needs to be a part of the sales pitch that we all take away from this, is that we need to communicate to not our LEA admins, hey, you need to go do this, but we're communicating to the students, to the parents, to the people that have that address, that this is of use for you to know. This is of use for you to find out and to be able to share, because it gives you benefit. Not just for us too, you know, that same code, again, they could share it with their child and their child will know it, be able to actually say it without it being incredibly complex. And it also counts for many things such as voter registration. The Postal Service completely supports it. So there's a lot of good things that you can get from actually bringing that down to the parent and the student, to let them understand this is a new technology piece of data in their benefit. To find out more about this, or just other things that using Google Plus codes help for these rural areas of Utah that don't have physical street addresses. I've also provided a link there where there's lots of different videos and people talking about how it's made a difference for them, with thousands of Utah residents that have already been using this for some time. So, any more questions before I wrap things up and hand over to Katie? All right, well, feel free to reach out to me if any do come up. Thank you, everyone.
Microphone, is this dead? Hello, it's dead. I think it died. Katie, are you online? I know we have
Yes, I'm
another
here.
Okay, you're on.
Okay, thanks.
Can you guys hear her? Wait. You're gonna have to yell, Katie, into the mic, because our mic here is dead, so
Hello.
just speak really loud.
Okay, how's that?
Better, okay.
I actually, Erin, for time, I wonder if maybe you want to just go to the last slide and just point people to that, and then I think that's it.
That one. There we go. Okay, Katie. That one?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
all the information you know will be in the PowerPoint. Obviously, here's the last slide. If you need reference. No, I'm sorry, it died. It's like, sorry, we're done. So. No, I asked. I mean, I did, but. And I'll tell you the truth is Katie and myself, Jared, we have another meeting starting in just a few minutes anyway. So you're like, oh, but I want to see all this. Privacy components. I mean, they had the privacy conference they just had last week. Is she gone? Okay. Any questions you want to ask Katie in group? I don't know. I didn't prepare her slides. I know she was.
I'm still
Katie,
here,
you got-
Erin, if you need me.
You got 3 minutes, Katie, if you want.
Well, but I think you said the mic is down.
The microphone in this room is not working anymore, so we can only hear you from the computer. And there's about 20, 30, how many people are in here? 30 people?
Yeah, yeah, just tell them to look at this. You're
He
sending out
says,
the
look at the
slides.
slides. So,
You're sending
go
the
ahead.
slides out later, right?
Yes, we will be sending
Okay.
the slides out.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Look at the slides. Okay, key sentence or key takeaways you want them to hear from you.
We would love for you to register for the privacy listserv, which is that first link.
So I don't know if you heard. Sign up for the privacy listserv and
And then if you want information about legislative stuff, you could either look at that highlights document or watch the training recordings from last week.
yeah, I'd recommend look at the training recordings from last week, see what's going on with privacy. There are some important things coming down legislatively. Some of you were in those meetings last week, so again, those are the recommendations. Go and take a look at that. Okay, and Katie, you may have to present next month's meeting. We'll put you like first on the calendar or okay. Well, everyone. Someone else wants me to join the meeting. So thank you. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Drive safe. We'll see you in the next meeting. So McCall, you want to grab one of these individuals on this front row and say meeting room for next year. This meeting room for next year. It works.